Sometimes I feel that games rely too much on convention, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that when big companies are gunning for sales, they're going to want to reach as large of an audience as possible. Through this, you can get some really vanilla, generic games that don't really have any ideas of their own. But you'll also find games that may seem formulaic, but as you stick with them, you'll slowly realize just how unique they are. When I started playing Red Dead Redemption 2, I didn't expect the amazing characters to grip me in such a powerful way. When I started playing Breath of the Wild, I didn't expect to feel so moved by the freedom of how you can approach every single aspect of the game. And when I started playing Risk of Rain 2, I didn't expect it to be the least conventional game I've ever played. Risk of Rain 2 certainly starts off pretty conventional though. You land in this grassy flat map. You're either playing the Commando or the Huntress, who are both pretty basic characters, and everything is pretty similar to other roguelikes. But how do you go from that generic stuff to this madness? Well, let me tell you. Risk of Rain 2 is a very deceptive game, but it's not the kind of deception with other games where there's just a single twist that makes the game different from what you first thought. Risk of Rain 2 uses a very slow build to draw the player in, because in the first hours of the game, you're always discovering something new every stage. Maybe it's a new item you didn't know about. Maybe you found this strange interactable that will help you out later, or fought a new boss. While Risk of Rain 2 doesn't have an instant hook to knock you off your feet, it has an excellent grasp on how to push the player to keep playing the game, to keep discovering new secrets, and to keep getting better, until you finally realize how different it is from its contemporaries, and a big part of that has to do with how items work in this game. In most roguelikes, you get items as a reward for beating enemies, or you select them from a shop and buy what you want. You go into a shop and you have multiple options at different price ranges, and you can take as many items as you want as long as you have the money. In Risk of Rain 2, shops are few and far between, and you actually can't spend any real money at them, and the only enemies who drop items are bosses. So, how do you get more powerful? Well, the main way of getting items is through these chests here, which only drop one item, and the chests that do have multiple items shut down after you only grab one. So are you just a victim to RNG throughout the whole game and have no choice in your items? Absolutely not. Let me introduce you to the Scrapper. What a great thing the Scrapper is. Every time I see one of these things, I go, ooh! You know, just a little bit. You know how I was saying that 95% of the chests you get in the game only drop one item that's given to you at random? Well, look here. Let's say I don't want this item right here. Now, that's scrap. And you can put that scrap into randomly spawning 3D printers throughout the stage. There are usually only about 2 to 4 3D printers per stage, and they all only feed you one specific item per piece of scrap. So you can't choose what item you want specifically, but you do have the choice of holding onto your scrap for a better 3D printer. If I have 10 white scrap and I see a good printer, I'm going to use up all that scrap ASAP so I can make my stats way better. With something like a backup mag printer? Probably not, but you do have the option if you want to. The Scrapper evens out the rigid way that you collect items by allowing you the option of transforming them into something different while still keeping a level of randomness involved, giving the player a huge amount of freedom while still making sure that your runs don't all feel the same. You can fuck up a perfectly good build with the Scrapper and the 3D printers, and it'll all be your choice. Backing up these item mechanics is a great selection of characters. You've got the Huntress, who is fast but dies quick, the Void Man who charges up his laser beam, the Bandit who goes for backstabs and crits to deal bleed, the Loader with their grapple hook, Railgunner, Engineer, Acrid, Captain, Rex, Mercenary, Artificer, and my personal favorite, Multi, the killer robot who is also a janitor. All of these characters have their own different playstyle, their own ways of traversal and offensive maneuvers. They all have different items that fit better to their play, and not one character is a dud. Even the Commando, who is more of a basic character, has its own special niche, which is a lack of a niche altogether. The Commando is just simply adequate at movement, damage, and attack speed, and it leaves room for the rest of the characters to be more zany while still having a basic option for new players, as well as experienced players who just want a change of pace. Hell, my friend who has 400 hours on the game mains Commando, for some reason. No judgment here. A big part of the reason that the characters are so fun to play, and the reason that I keep coming back to Risk of Rain 2 overall, is that the game does not care if you are overpowered. In fact, it pretty much encourages it. A lot of the fun in Risk of Rain 2 just comes from seeing how powerful you can get with the different characters by making sure that you can take the most advantage of the printers available to you. With the Huntress, you can go insanely fast, and you'll want to load up on goat hooves and energy drinks. The Railgunner's going to want to stack crowbars and bands to one-shot everything. With the Commando, you'll want as much attack speed as possible, so that way when you shoot, it goes like... Risk of Rain 2 certainly doesn't offer as much freedom as something like Breath of the Wild, but it doesn't really have to, because open world games are always advertised as these worlds where you can do whatever you want. Risk of Rain 2's appeal comes from the fact that it is bold enough to stray away from the more conventional aspects of the roguelike genre. Where other games would have a soft cap for certain stats, Risk of Rain 2 goes, here you go, have 2000% more attack speed, have fun. Looking at a run of a game like Hades, after about a half hour into the run you'll have some new abilities, but overall the experience really hasn't changed much. Now here's a run of Risk of Rain 2 right at the beginning. Now here it is a half hour later. That obviously isn't a shot at Hades or anything, but it is a testament to how refreshing Risk of Rain 2's pacing is. The game by far has one of the most unique approaches to balancing I've ever seen in a game, but it still has just enough standard elements that it doesn't become too unpalatable. They even got a mechanic where if you buy this shrine, all your items will be turned into a huge amount of just a few items. Now look at this. My run is ruined. The problems I encountered with Risk of Rain 2 unfortunately do come from that freedom you have in the game. It has a lot more opportunities to break because of its fully 3D and expansive environments instead of the top-down dungeons like most other roguelikes. However, I was pretty unbothered by this, and a majority of the glitches that I encountered were actually more funny than annoying, so it's ultimately a pretty minor issue. In the end, I'd rather have a fantastic game that's a little more janky than a generic one that runs perfectly, and I think that jank actually kinda adds to the charm of the game overall. A charm that you should experience for yourself, so if you haven't played Risk of Rain 2, fair warning, I want to talk about the final boss. At the start of a Risk of Rain 2 run you have this many items, and near the end you have this many items. So the most simple yet insane thing that the final boss does is this. Where'd all my items go? He has them now, and you have to damage him to get them back in increments, making the fight a slow curve of who has more items. At the beginning you're hiding from him and getting tiny hits in to get your items back, and nearing the end you can actually get up close because Mithrix is a pathetic weakling. This mechanic is so genius, so simple, and so fun, and it's the perfect end to any Risk of Rain 2 run. Unless you feed this silly frog 10 lunar coins. I won't say what happens though. Risk of Rain 2 is a game that has a bit of a steep initial learning curve, but that doesn't mean that you have to be good at the game to have fun. I had a great time during the first dozen hours I played, figuring out what all the items do, and I enjoyed even more now that I have the skill to make a run last over 2 hours long. It doesn't take a lot of work to get into a rhythm of getting better each run, and before you know it, you'll have sunk a whole lot of time into the game. Its mechanics are unique, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's the best roguelike I've ever played. You know, when I'm not stuck in a wall.